Kenny and Michael and I are here. It is May 18th, 2022. It is 5 years since we lost Chris Cornell of Soundgarden, clearly Audio Slave and Solo, and so many other different projects and ideas. And we just want to take some time to talk about the music he was involved in, without belaboring, the anniversary. But we just want to remember and kind of think about the impact and what it meant to us as music fans, for you guys as musicians, and the impact that I still feel. I still can listen to his catalog, and I still, it brings me to tears. Makes me incredibly happy at the same time, and it's not always fun, happy music, but it still makes me smile. So thank you for joining us and talking
Thanks
about Chris Cornell.
Yeah.
I was in Detroit 5 years ago last night, and I was seventh row at the show, and just enjoying just being that close and being a part of what was going on. So.
Yeah. But it was, I think it was like 1:30 or 1:40 or something in the morning.
Yeah.
When they found him. So you didn't know till the next morning, though?
I had to drive my son to the train station. He was going out of town for a couple of days. So I got up at 5 to take him to the train station. Just before we left, something popped up on my computer. I can't remember on my laptop or my phone, but something popped up and said, this has happened. And I went, okay, I'm really tired because I just went to bed. I got home at 1. So I'd been asleep for 3 hours, and I had to get up and drive him to the train station. So I just thought, oh man, I'm exhausted. I literally just saw the guy,
sure,
maybe 30 feet from me. So that's whatever this is saying. I'm just delirious, and I kind of got him to the station, and then I got home and read, and it hit me. It was just like, and I didn't know the guy. We weren't friends, right? But it hit so hard, having been that close, but also, having been a fan of what he does. So
yeah, you're not alone there, because I mean, when it happened, I had a lot of friends and family texting me or calling me because they knew what he had meant to me growing up, and kind of what a big influence. And a lot of my buddies were like, "Why does this feel different? Why is it hitting different, man? This hurts like hell." And I don't know why. You're right. Like, we didn't know him, but why did it feel like you almost did? Like he really opened up that side of himself that was very vulnerable, and obviously, could be quite dark.
Yeah. And
he exposed that like a nerve, to us. So I think that's why. I mean, if any of us have that sort of, darkness, that we could relate to him. But you know what, man, I thought he was past it. He was 52.
Yeah.
And I thought he'd made it. So I remember I was on my way to work, and my good friend John, who I do the podcast with, he called me, and he never calls me. He always just texts me. And he called me and he said, "Dude, Chris died last night." And I had to pull over. I couldn't even drive. I couldn't see the road. My eyes instantly welled up with water.
Yep. And
I lost my mind. And I just went on Google, and I was like, is that real? Is that real? Are you kidding me? And then it was the way it happened too. Like, it wasn't, Bowie was sick, so that, I mean, Bowie hurt like hell, but he was sick. But Chris was just gone. He was just gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it hurt differently, man. And I got to tell you, it doesn't hurt any less.
No, it really doesn't.
It still smokes me every time I listen to his music. Sometimes I don't bother. I can't do it. It's like, I can't, man. I know it sounds silly. And I came home, and the first song I put on was Dead Wishes from his Higher Truth record.
Yeah. And
it's silly, but I just wept like on my wife's shoulder. Like, she just held me, and she didn't because it sounds ridiculous, but she knew what it meant. So she was really respectful and nice, but I was just like, I was like, is this ridiculous? Like, why am I crying? I didn't even know the guy.
Yeah.
But she's like, no, it makes sense. Like, he meant a lot to you. It's okay. It's not that ridiculous, man. You're not alone. How many fans are just like devastated. We were talking about Taylor Hawkins earlier, and I'd seen an interview with him and Dave after it happened, and he'd said, I almost feel selfish because my first thought was like, oh, I'm never going to hear another Chris Cornell record.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's his first thought is like, man, now I don't get to hear any more Chris Cornell albums. And he felt like, oh, that's a bit selfish, but it's like, oh, I get that. I get that
Yeah.
we're only going to hear, whether it's B-sides or unreleased stuff, and never going to hear a brand new, he just wrote it, Chris Cornell.
Well, and the feeling that there was so much more.
Yeah, he wasn't done yet.
Yeah.
He was still singing. I mean, the show you were at is up on YouTube. You can watch it. He was in fine voice. He sang fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, heartbreaking.
I didn't know that part of the story for you, Ryan. That's devastating. That hurts me, like the dude was like, not only like a trailblazer in rock and rock expression to me.
Right.
But he did feel personal,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even as a believer, just like all the imagery and connection, to things that language that I know, he and all the guys were piling stuff in there. But I think for him in particular, like his style, his vocal styling, and how it married with what they were trying to accomplish in their sound as a band. I remember this interview in Spin or Rolling Stone or something. I think it was Spin. Yeah, I think it was Spin years ago. And I just remember them talking a lot about how, we're a very masculine band.
Right.
And I just loved how that they were like describing, they're trying to give everybody a break. Like, hey, listen, don't come over here expecting, some sort of delicate flower,
Right.
This is what we do, and I loved it, I just respected it, and their influences require that. I mean, you can't come into the house of some of these greats they were emulating, and then they were mashing it together, and then just with his voice soaring over the top of this, expressing these intense ideas and imagery. And it's like, man, who knows what half of it meant, but boy, did it mean something different to each of us,
Absolutely. Yeah.
It was so profound against the backdrop of that aggression and that masculinity and that intensity and that beauty and that atonality at times. It's like they were using all the best stuff and serving it to us on this very vicious and beautiful platter, and I think for it to happen while he's on tour with that crew, man, that is the heartbreaker,
Yeah. Well, that was 2017. My father had passed away in the fall of 2016, and we were with him right till the end. And he had been sick for a while, but that was the moment. Okay, so there's Flies in Blue Skies, going back to King's X.
Mm-hmm.
There is life, there is death, and the difference between either one is one single breath. In that moment, when my dad passed, I saw the difference. I saw and fully and comprehended something that I'd never comprehended before. Because that lyric to me was always just like, oh, what a beautiful lyric. That really is interesting. That lyric came to life, and I saw the difference between present and absent, right? And it was a profound moment in my life. And the next time I felt it was being this close to the singer on the stage, and then hours later hearing that he was gone. And again, it came back to me that the difference between it's one single breath. And I thought, man, the lyric just sounded really pretty and really nice before. And I went, no, this is truth. Like this is flat out truth. The fragility of life, can't be understated, overstated, understated. And again, one of those profound moments through music, through art, where I comprehend things that of a next level, of a higher plane that I didn't understand before. And that's what I love about what art can do in so many ways. Help me to understand these concepts.
Yeah.
And so it was heartbreaking, but it was also very sobering.
Yeah.
Right. So this is how fragile. This is why you treat people well. This is why you tell the people that you love them, because you have no guarantee that tomorrow. What a great somber approach. But it's just life. It just really is. It's like the older I get, the more I understand these greater concepts, and just in fractions. But I understand them a little bit better than they did yesterday.
That's also Soundgarden, and I mean, I guess Chris more in the nutshell, because he was the lyricist for Audio
Right.
Slave Soundgarden. Like, he wrote all the lyrics. So it's very like Kenny was touching on earlier, very ecclesiastical.
Yeah.
In a way, if you
Yeah.
read Ecclesiastes, there's a lot of sort of like, isn't this all just meaningless? Like, what's the point?
Right.
I'm going to work hard my whole life and sweat and toil to leave it to my kids, who I don't even know if they're going to grow up to be like a good person or not.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, we're not promised the next moment, So I think Chris, yeah, man, that is Soundgarden in a nutshell for sure. I didn't know, and I didn't realize that they had started in 1984. Isn't that
Wow.
bananas?
They were back that far?
Yeah, that's when
Really?
they officially started, was 84.
Wow.
Overnight sensation.
Yeah. Yeah, because when's Ultra Mega OK? Is that 88?
Yeah.
I think Ultra Mega OK is 88.
Yeah, I think
Yes, 88. Yep.
yeah, 88 would be,
Because I
yeah.
know they had a couple of EPs before that. They had the Screaming Life and then the FOP EP before Ultra Mega OK. But I know they were coming up with King's X, because I don't know if you guys read the interview with Doug when Chris had passed. And in the interview, Pinnock is really venting. He's kind of going like, frick, Chris, like, you had kids and you did it, you made it and everything. Like, he was just frustrated. But he was telling this one really cool anecdote about they were working on Dogman and Cornell was working on Super Unknown. And Doug and Chris made a promise to each other to start singing in lower registers because they were both getting like, oh my gosh, how much more higher can we go?
Right.
So if you do listen to both of those records, they're still impressive. But Cornell does start to like not have that sort of big wailing thing as much anymore. He starts to sort of, and then obviously on Down on the Upside, and then so on and so on. But I just love that story that Doug was like, every time he saw Chris, they gave each other a big kiss and a big hug. And yeah, he was just, he was just this beautiful guy, full of joy and full of life.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess behind closed doors, you just never know,
Yeah.
People have their demons. Like Robin Williams is this comedian who just makes people smile for a living.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you see Robin Williams smile, you can't help but smile.
Oh, absolutely.
That guy
infectious.
had a beautiful smile, and how old was he? He was older than Cornell, wasn't he? He was in his 60s.
He's 60.
Like,
Yeah.
it's wild to think that. Well, I'm past it. I'm old enough now, but sorry, it's emotional.
Yeah. It's one of those things too that I think, as I listen to, because I've been listening to a lot of Chris's music over the last couple of weeks to prepare, but I listen to a lot of Chris's music on an average day regardless, and I'm left with the impression that there wasn't a lyric that he would shy away from, like that kind of fearless writing. Like, it's like I don't get the impression that he went, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this, maybe I shouldn't say that. He was somebody who, I mean, look, the Timbaland album, okay, he took a lot of heat. He took a lot of heat for doing something different. Right?
Yeah.
And I was applauding him for doing something different. I liked it. There's elements of that album I really like. I love the fact that he stepped out and went, I'm going to do this now. And I don't really care if anybody wants to go with me on it.
That's almost the most rock and roll thing he could have done, was
Absolutely.
by doing that record with Timbaland. It's like, I don't give a shit. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And he even had like his peers like Trent Reznor tearing him down in the press and stuff like that. But it's like, he had the balls to do it. And I'm with you, man. I don't hate Scream. I actually like that record a lot. Yeah. His voice is in good form, and there's some good songs on there. I don't mind it at all. But.
He always kind of sent a clue that, hey, this is a part of me. The pop aspect is a part of me. And I think that like dudes just missed it,
Yeah.
They didn't really want to take it seriously because even when they were making Super Unknown, it's like they were talking about this, like, hey, listen, this is why you get a song like Black Hole Sun. It's like, because this is a part of us. This is, it's like this is a part of our language of the beauty and the melodiousness and all that stuff. And I remember reading an interview and trying to couple interviews, and just he's just trying to let you know, hey, this is a part of my thing. So when he does it later on, and people were like shocked, what are you doing? It's like, man, he's probably thinking to himself, I tried to tell you.
I've been trying to tell you for years.
Yeah.
This is a musical gumbo going on inside of me, and who knows what's going to come out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's probably why a lot of people, like, they can't put their finger on or wrap their head around why they like the Soundgarden melodies, and they're so catchy, and some of them are so beautiful. Well, it's because Chris grew up listening to Sam Cooke and Solomon Burke, and he listened to those guys, and the band were influenced by Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. I mean, Ozzy sang wonderful melodies in Black Sabbath. That's why we can sing along to those Sabbath tunes.
Yeah, exactly.
Ozzy's melodies. So yeah, that's a good point, man. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. I just, haters, man, I tell you, if it's not the rock thing, you're not allowed to do, you're not allowed to do anything but the rock thing. He got a little bit of flack when Euphoria Morning came out. It wasn't Soundgarden, like anything even remotely related to Soundgarden. And that's why I liked it.
Absolutely.
His voice is ridiculous on that record. Steel Rain and oh my gosh, Can't Change Me and Preaching to the End of the World, like that. Song, that album is stacked. It's an incredible record, and I think now it gets respect, but at the time, dude,
definitely did not.
Well, and he's working with cats, like the dudes from 11. And it's like, those guys, I mean, people aren't hip to 11, just go listen to all their crap. That band was an epiphany for me, and they were just doing, I mean, you can't even describe it, it's Beatlesque, it's alt rock, it's all these things, no bass player, just piano, drums, and guitar and voices. And that's who Chris was working with in that era, and they were just expressing themselves, man. They were just expressing them, it's like, it's hard to process when you're coming out of the grandiose nature of the Soundgarden,
big machine.
Machine. It's like, but man, this is part of me, he's a true creative, so you gotta let the dude create.
I don't know that this is true, but I'd like to believe that this is true, that he didn't care, and not in a way that he didn't care about the fans' reaction or whatever. I just think he didn't care if you went with him on this trip or not.
Right.
Like Be Yourself, the song Be Yourself. I always go back to that and listen to that lyric with Audio Slave, and it's like, I'm just going to be me. And these are all the influences that I have. And sometimes I'm going to throw out these influences. Some I'm going to sound like this. I'm going to do this. Sometimes I'm going to cover Billie Jean.
Yeah.
Why would you take a song like Billie Jean, right? That everybody knows, when I DJ'd, and I put that on, it didn't matter. Everybody was on the dance floor, right? Even if you didn't want to be, when that beat starts, you have to hit the dance floor. And for him to take a song that is virtually untouchable, and do it the way he did it, and make you go, that could be a completely different song. Like, why would you take on that song of all songs? You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, that's why he did it. I interviews with him that he said, what's the most crazy thing I can do that's going to make people go, what the hell? And it's Chris Cornell covering a Michael Jackson.
That's the first time in my life I'd ever heard the lyrics clearly of that song. Honestly, like I sang it so the way you sing songs, you don't know the lyrics, right? It's like, and it was like, oh, that's what he's saying? The truth and the lie? What?
He's got a great story about that too, when Cash did Rusty Cage. And how all of a sudden he was getting all these emails and stuff from people in the industry saying like, what great lyrics on that Rusty Cage. Is like, yeah, I fucking wrote it.
It's mine.
Like in 1991, it came out. You guys didn't know.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
They didn't know the lyrics until Johnny Cash sang them.
Yeah, exactly. So true.
Boy named Sue, man.
So in the early 2000s, we had sort of a trifecta of supergroups. We had Velvet Revolver, which you kind of
Yeah.
get the Guns N' Roses with Stone Temple Pilots. Then you had Army of Anyone, which was the DeLeo brothers from Stone Temple Pilots with Ray Luzier on drums, who does KXM with Doug.
Right.
And then Robert Patrick from Filter. And then you had Rage Against the Machine looking for a new singer.
Yeah.
That ended up becoming Audioslave. For me, they were my favorite, even though I think Velvet Revolver probably sold more records. I think they were the bigger thing, but Audioslave was my favorite out of those three. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like a 3 for me. I mean, it was all kind of all the same pocket. I think that probably Chris's lyrics probably stands out,
Yeah.
and that's probably the difference maker.
Yeah.
I feel like the Velvet Revolver thing was a little too cock rock for me.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I would agree. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what Kenny said is pretty right on, like profound. Chris's lyrics are going to be the thing that sort of separates, And I don't know if you guys heard the Army of Anyone record. They only did the one record,
Yeah.
and it sold like
I remember hearing about
6 copies, and I've got one of them.
it.
It's a
It's
phenomenal
numbered.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal record. It really is really good. I mean, if you like STP,
Yeah.
the music is really solid. And then Richard Patrick. Robert Patrick's his brother who plays
Right.
the actor.
It's a Terminator.
The Terminator, yeah.
T2.
Yeah.
But Richard's great. He's got a great voice. Not
Yeah.
like really unlike Chris Cornell, like that sort of super distorted, sort of screamy type sort of vocals. So that made sense to me. But yeah, it's Chris for me. Were you guys big Rage fans too? Did you like the pairing? Did you think it made sense?
I was a little bit like against it, but I felt like once again, like I think that the you cannot replicate Rage's rage.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that was something that was like severely missing for me. And so that's why I say that the lyrics would have been kind of the thing that would have made that project stand out,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys know, were those tracks and music that Zach was going to be spitting on, or were they brand new from scratch with Chris? Like, I know I Am the Highway and Like a Stone were probably songs that Chris brought in.
Yeah.
But a lot of those, they're so Rage riffs. Like, it's so
Gasoline.
Yeah, Gasoline, and even Cochise.
Cochise, yeah. I can see probably Gasoline and Cochise probably might have been originally written as
might have been
Rage
kicking
Against the
around with Battle of LA. Maybe they were jamming on it with Zach.
I don't know who mixed that record or who produced it and who mixed it.
Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin did the first 2.
Rick Rubin.
So Rick did the first 2? Okay.
Yeah, and then Brendan O'Brien did the third one, Revelations.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, those are the guys. I still don't feel like the stuff jumped out of the speakers the same, And so, and maybe there was, something in the process that I think was like, I think they tried to make it too thick compared to what Rage was doing. And so I think there was something about the Rage thing in that it was kind of, it was a little thinner, but it ate at you,
Okay.
And then you put that dude's voice on top and it's just eating at you even more. I think they gained a lot of energy from his intensity,
Sure.
And I think when you have Chris, as dope as his voice is, you can't replicate that Rage, And so And so I think that was kind of a delineation. And I think that it's hard to put them in the same pocket, and I think that's what the mind is trying to do.
Yeah. I think kind of looking back at it now, because I saw him on that first tour, and what I got from that show was the gratefulness. Chris was he must have thanked the audience 4 or 5 times for even coming out to see them. And you're like, dude, I get to see you on stage, with those guys.
Yeah.
You're thanking me. But there was such a sense of, we're trying this out. Not so much we're trying this out, but it was like, thanks for supporting this. Thanks for supporting what we're doing. And I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. I don't think Chris came in saying, I'm going to be Zach. And I don't think the other guys came in and said they were going to be Soundgarden.
Yeah.
I think they just had a mentality that said, let's just see what happens.
I think that's exactly what they
there's
would
chemistry. Yeah. Yeah.
And they would do like Sleep Now in the Fire.
Oh yeah. They did. They would cover.
And I think they would do Outshined or Spoon Man or something too. So there was always like a lot of definite mutual respect there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think Chris was really struggling with addiction at the time. If you do look at a lot of live footage of Audio Slave, it's hit and miss with his voice. There was, I remember buying the Live in Cuba, the DVD, and being really disappointed because Chris's voice, he was not having a good night. He struggled with every single song.
Yeah.
Really a shame. And I think it felt like the audience knew it. Like the audience knew he was struggling. And then they did Sleep Now in the Fire. And all of a sudden the audience was just bouncing as soon as Morello started that. And then all of a sudden this energy came back to the show as soon as they did a Rage tune. And then they went back to Audio Slave and then it just kind of died again.
Play the hits.
But see, that's the issue. I think that with that whole experience. And I think Chris knew it, but he's an artist, man. He's just trying to be a part of things that he feels are going to serve that part of himself, It's like, if you could do that in a vacuum and make money, that would be great, but that's not the way it works, Right. And so, and I think that because he did struggle, a lot of times with his live vocal, execution, and specifically when he's dealing with a lot of crap and he's not really at his best, it's like, that's going to be conveyed to the audience and they're going to sense it. So I think that also probably a lot of the fan base was responding to their love for 3 of the 4 members of the band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that they're showing up ready for that level of, intensity and excitement and ferocity. And they're getting something more, a little bit more contemplative, a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge, that takes an adjustment, and, they did enough music to where they're a part of the rock and roll lexicon now,
Yeah.
But I think initially it would have been pretty tough. And I think your experience watching that DVD is like that's what, that's kind of the story with Chris in that era. And so
yeah,
they didn't even tour the last album. They just put it out and then he was already off doing the James Bond thing. Which maybe can lead us into like the solo stuff. Did you guys like the solo stuff? Did you pay attention to Euphoria Morning, Carry On, and then he did
every single one.
Songbook.
Every single one.
That's the tour I saw him on. I saw him.
Oh, you saw a Songbook tour?
And it sounded like he kind of got his voice back after years of sort of struggling with Audio Slave. Sounded like he was singing again. And I remember him saying, like, I just wanted to go up there with an acoustic guitar and kind of sing again. And then he put out Higher Truth.
I remember hearing that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in between all that, in 2012, he put out King Animal, which was the big Soundgarden reunion album.
Right.
Which I thought was great.
Yeah.
That was a really good record.
That was a cool record.
Yeah. I love Can't Change Me.
Yeah.
That's a song. If it's playing in the car, I don't get out of the car until it's done.
Good.
I could listen to that on a loop. I just love that was the introduction because it was the first single off Euphoria Morning. Yes. And there was a change, which I thought was interesting. I think it was originally, there was a U in it or there wasn't a U in it? I can't remember, but somewhere along the line, it was Euphoria Morning with a U or with just the morning MORNING, and now it's MOURNING.
He always wanted it to be MO
to be with the U.
But
yeah, that's what I thought.
Wouldn't let him. So now every copy you find has got the U back in it.
Yeah. I've got the original.
Did you guys watch like singles? So you heard Seasons and those earlier sort of solo stuff?
Yeah.
What's that?
The singles. Do you remember that Cameron Crowe movie, Singles?
Oh, right. Yes.
With Matt Dillon and Pearl Jam in it, and
right. Yeah.
Chris Cornell's in it, and he's wearing a fanny pack. I wrote a song on that Screw Tape record called "Fanny Pack for Cece," and that's about Chris.
Well, I mean, and again, there's sometimes you meet people, and it's like the only thing you can do is be a rock star. Yeah. Whether they and they're not self-proclaimed. but you know, like when when Michael Rowe walks into a room, Michael Rowe is built to be a rock star, right? It's just who he is. It's in his blood. And Chris Cornell was one of those people where it's like, well, what's that guy do? Well, he's a rock star. Whatever he's doing, he's a rock star. And not in the worst way, in the best way.
Yeah. There's sort of a genetic kind of code that goes with some dudes, you know. I was just thinking about all the, like, speaking of, you talking about Michael Rowe, he's like, oh, Michael Knott too. Yeah. Michael Sweet. There's a lot of Michaels on the Christian side.
A lot of Michaels, yeah. Absolutely.
You go on the other side, Michael Jackson.
I do remember the first road trip I did by myself. That was 2002, want to say. Maybe it was 2001. I did Detroit to like Southern Illinois. And it was one of those things where it was starting to snow. It was Christmas time and it was starting to snow. I got about an hour out and I went, do I really want to do this by myself? Yeah, I think I will. And I just kept driving, had a good time. So all the way there, you're driving through the kind of southern Michigan, and there's all these Christian stations all the way along. And that was at the point where I was still listening to a lot of Christian music and stuff because there was still some good stuff coming out in the early 2000s. But it was being ushered out. And so I was listening to all these stations because I want to hear what was new, what, you know, any bands I hadn't heard of. And I just kept hearing the same. That was when I started hearing the same stuff, the same producers, the same sound. It was going in that direction. And then I put on Show Me How to Live for the first time, I think, on that trip. And I went, that's what I want. I want that raw honesty. I mean, the lyric on that song to me just still blows me away. You gave me life, now show me how to live. Like, come on, who are you talking to? Like,
nail in my hands for my creator.
Yeah. This is like a worship song that I wasn't hearing on any a level where that I wasn't hearing on the stations that I was trying to find stuff on. And right. I remember writing an article about it at the time, going, that's what I want, and I'm not hearing it where I should be hearing it. This is a group that's trying to give me all the answers. This guy's, you know, like Ecclesiastes said, asking all the questions.
Yeah.
And that's when my shift in life started to move towards, let me follow people who are just begging for the answer, want the answer. That's the kind of stuff I want to be running through my brain.
Yeah.
For sure. Cool. Yeah. Well, how did you guys, what was your first interaction with Soundgarden back in the day?
Yeah, for me it was Bad Motorfinger. We were doing a project in high school, and we had to like edit all these clips together, but we had to have music on top. So we picked that middle 8 section from Outshined.
Yeah.
Where Kim plays those major chords and Chris is just doing the screaming on time.
Yeah.
On top of that. And I was just like, what in holy hell is that? And that was it. And I don't think I ever really like got like obsessed until maybe even Down on the Upside, where they were sort of breaking up, you know. But Bad Motorfinger, and then Super Unknown was kind of my record. I was a little older I'm a little younger than you guys, so in 94, 95, I'm about 14, 15 years old.
Sure, rub it in. Sure, why not?
So I'm in high school, so probably handling it a little different than maybe you guys who were a little bit older.
Sorry, what'd you say? I couldn't hear you. Oh, my hearing aid was turned. Oh, you kids. I
didn't mean anything by it.
Back in my day. I'm kidding.
You're listening to Dan Fogelberg and playing.
Yeah. On the Victrola. I did a radio show with the Victrola. It was pretty amazing. I don't know how I did it.
Al Jolson.
That's right.
Al Jolson.
The talkies, you know.
That was me. It was Bad Motorfinger for sure. But by the time like you heard, you know, My Wave and The Day I Tried to Live, Fell on Black Days, you know.
Yeah.
It was it, man. That Super Unknown that was their pinnacle too. That's where I think they sold 10 million of that one. That was a big one for them. So
just freaking genius. I mean, it really like I watched those dudes. I think I first discovered them, I guess it would probably been 89 maybe.
Wow.
I was working this job in Gardner, Kansas. It's like, I don't know, 20 minutes away from Olathe, Kansas, which is where I lived and where I grew up. And I was working at this microfiche shop. This is my first like grown-up job, you know. After working at Hardee's and Walmart, this is my first real grown-up job. And I drive out there, and then I ended up working night shift, and I'd have to make these trips out to this big telecom building. It was out in the middle of nowhere. They had this like Reliant K station wagon that I had to drive. Put a bunch of those big round tapes in the back of the thing and take them out to this, you know, to this dock and unload them in this room with all these computers, you know, the big computers back in the day, you know,
Reel to reel.
Yeah, that's exactly what they were. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, but while I was rolling out there, I listened to KJHK out of Lawrence, and it was the college station, man. And they would play all this, you know, crazy college rock and alternative music. They didn't call it alternative music at the time, but it was college stuff, you know. And it'd come in, be breaking up on the radio, but it's one stretch of the road, it would be like real clear. And I remember hearing this band, you know, this dude screaming, you know, a Soundgarden. I was like, okay, that was really interesting. Check that out, you know?
Yep.
And then, and that was where I first heard Smells Like Teen Spirit. I mean, it was like months and months and months before it hit the radio, you know, the regular radio. But it was like, I froze, and I mean, it was like a moment in time. It's like, you know, it's like, where were you when 9/11 happened? I mean, that's the thing.
Fixed in time.
It was just like, what is coming out of where is there aliens? I mean, I just didn't know. I was like, I'm out in the dark, you know, it's just like me in this car, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, don't drive too fast because you don't want to lose the signal, because you got to hear, you know. Oh,
don't turn your head.
Right. I didn't know all this stuff was happening in Seattle. I didn't know these bands were from a place, you know. And then I remember like shortly thereafter, was it K-Rock? K-Rock came to Kansas City, and it was on AM station. So they were like syndicated across the
syndicated. Yeah. They came to Detroit probably about the same time.
Yeah. And so I remember driving around, you know, the city and listening to this and discovering all these bands. And I was like, oh, that's that band, Soundgarden. That dude's just squealing, man. You know, these guys are just, they sound like nothing else that was on there, you know, nothing. I was like, these dudes are really interesting. But, you know, Chris was still figuring out his voice. He still kind of had this like weasel thing going on, you know. It was like, it was, the band was fierce and he was crazy, you know, but it's like, bruh, I was into it enough that was like, when Bad Motorfinger was about to come out, I'd been reading about it and knew that Terry Date was involved. And I'm like, and the way they were describing what it was going to be, I got to check this out, you know? And I went and bought that record and put that joint on, and I nearly crapped myself. I was like, I couldn't believe how amazing this record was.
Yeah.
I think they maybe had outshined on the radio by the time the release had come out on K-Rock. And so I think I was probably hip to that. And that kind of obviously blew me away. But just to go on the ride with them, how many notes and how many, you know, references that they were making in this music, you know, to the old blues, the hard rock, and this dude's voice, and he had discovered this soul and this thing where he could be way up here and then he could just dig deep into the soul. Now I'm gonna tell you, man, when I heard Holy Water for the first time, I was mystified, you know. And it's very similar to my first experience discovering King's X, you know, but it's like, I like to think of King's X as like me stumbling into the forest where the elves and the pixies lived, you know. And me stumbling into Bad Motorfinger was like, you know, landing where the minotaurs and the centaurs lived. You know, it was like, it was just much more violent, you know. And it was so amazing. I can't leave this place. I got to take pictures, you know. And I found myself in a circle of friends, you know. I ran with all these dudes who were in these Christian metal bands, and there was a circle of us that were like into the more like diverse and creative stuff. And we just talked about everything on that record. I mean, every note, every riff, every lyric, every, you know, drum line. I mean, it's like we were completely vexed by it.
Yeah.
When someone played it in a room we sang every note. We knew every pause, every break, we knew everything about that record because we all just immersed ourselves in it. And yeah, I'll never be the same. It's like that record changed the world for me, you know.
Did you get Jesus Christ Pose? Like, because I know the song was like getting banned on MTV or getting a lot of flack from like the Christian side of things. They were taking offense to it. But did you get why Chris was writing and what it was about?
I was not offended by it per se. I was concerned that it might have been weird, but there was too much other stuff in there that I was like, these guys are thinking about it from a different angle.
Exactly.
And then I saw him probably not long after the record came out. I think it was on actually MTV or some station like that where he was talking about it. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense. You know, it's like, you know, he just kind of gave his perspective on it. And he's just like, yeah, man, these dudes that are like acting like they're Lord and Savior, you know, exactly. I'm a rock star and I'm going to take this posture. It's like, he was offended by it, you know, or just thought it was lame. And I thought, I feel you, bro. You know?
Yeah.
I always had that problem with Jim Morrison. It was like, get out of here with all that, you know? But
yeah, right.
So I think that I related, you know, and it was very similar to what I had experienced because I had like once again Seattle, but when Alice in Chains was coming out, I had never heard them before, but I heard them on like I think it was Rockline or something, and they were introducing the album and they were talking about the lyrics in the album. And so like when I went and bought the tape, I was hip to what they were saying, you know, and they have a lot of context for those songs in this interview. And so it was like, it sounds like they're trying to be, you know, provocative and, you know, offensive, but they're not. They're literally, they're like on the positive tip of so many things that people just don't know because they don't know what they mean in it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I going into the Soundgarden thing, I was just like, yeah, man, you know, it's like, I whatever, bro, it's cool. We could, you know, I, you know, coming out of the metal scene and just being scared of everything for a long time, you know, you start to discover that dudes have different motivations for songs in the lyrics. And so I think running in kind of thrash cycles, you know, I was like I was in a thrash band and all these dudes were in all these bands. And so you start to kind of discover that just because people are saying weird, scary things, that's not what they mean all the time.
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah, yeah.
So so I was a little less bugged out about it, but I think I would probably for a few weeks, I was a little bit like, I hope this is not bad, but I don't think it is, you know?
You know, it's I love your story about how you found it because you went from K-Rock on, you know, on an AM station, right? I try to explain that to somebody now to say, look, I was listening to this, I got hooked on this song on an AM station, you know, outshined on an AM station, and then I heard it on CD. It must have just blown your mind that, oh, this is what it's supposed to sound.
Yeah, bro.
Like listening to that on an AM station, that's not the ideal way to listen to a song.
Especially because Terry Date, you know, he's got a thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, a lot of the bands that he was working with were like true like metal bands at the time. And so I think like I was hip to that part of him. And then when that song came through the speakers with the disc, you know, with the CD, and it just being so beautiful and so clear and so heavy and just aggressive and all the things. I'll say beautiful again. You know, it was beautiful, man. It was it's like, I love this, you know.
Yeah, it's a transition from a VHS tape to Blu-ray. I mean, it's got to be that, like, and you can't explain that to somebody because they're used to the Blu-ray. They had no idea what it used to sound like. I didn't mean to interrupt, but like that's quite the transition,
right?
Sonically to go from, you know, an AM station to.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, it was the same way. I don't know if you remember the band 24/7 Spies.
Yep.
But I remember hearing those cats, and it was like a Millennial Gumbo. And they played some song on there. It's like, man, I gotta go buy that tape, and then to hear it like in stereo in my book, you know, in my car. It's like that transformed my freaking life, man. It was like
to put me on a whole new path.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I gotta make records like that.
Yep. Which again, obviously, has inspired both of you to write and create and challenge yourselves.
Yeah.
in so many ways. In so many ways.
Absolutely.
I had to wait for so long because when I would hear Chris Cornell sing, like usually as a singer, and Kenny, you could probably relate to this. When you're sort of learning, you're emulating it first, right?
Hmm.
To try and find yourself, and then it'll go through the Kenny filter or the Michael filter.
Right.
But at first, you're just trying to like, I want to do what that guy's doing.
Mhm.
Cornell was just so far and beyond above my league or anybody else's league. I couldn't even try.
Yeah.
So he was almost untouchable to me. And there's a lot of guys that are sort of like that. You know, your Paul Rogers, your Robert Plant, and
Absolutely. Those guys.
and then when I would hear interviews of Paul Rogers, Paul would say like, "Well, I grew up listening to Otis Redding and Sam Cooke,
Yeah.
so now I got to go back now."
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
like, well, why does this guy sound like that? So now you go back and you're listening to Little Richard, and you're listening to Chuck Berry, and you're listening
Yeah.
to Ray Charles, and it's just you just got to go back, and then whatever influenced them. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, part of it is you go to it and you try to emulate it. And like Eric Clapton says, you know, your style comes from your limitation, you know?
Right.
And so that's what all those British cats were doing. They were imitating, and the ones that couldn't quite get there, they created a new thing, you know? It's like, and that was what was marketable, and that was super sexy about what they were doing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Have you both seen the clip with Dave Grohl talking about where he got the drum beat for Teen Spirit?
Mm-mm.
Gap Band. I will send it to you. It's the most amazing thing. And he's talking to, I'm trying to think who he's talking to. Pharrell. He's sitting talking to Pharrell, and he says, "You know where I got that song?" He's like, "No." And he goes, "Dum, dum." And then they play the Gap Band.
Yeah.
He's like, that's it. He goes, I've talked to the guys. I told them that's what I did.
That makes so much freaking sense.
It makes crazy sense.
Yeah.
You would never think that, you know, the one of the most recognizable beats
Yeah.
in music, period, of
Yeah.
that one song. He said,
Yeah.
I lifted it straight up Gap Band.
Well,
Wow.
you know, what's funny about that is, I mean, their last record, they, you know, he made the whole point of, you know, it's like, hey, we haven't really grooved, you know?
Right.
And I think that's what he was referencing is, you know, we have this other part of us, you know, that we've just never really taken advantage of, you know, putting in our music. And,
Yeah.
and I love that, you know, especially if you get older, you know, it's like, man, you're trying to go back to some stuff, you know, it's just the way it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there's this famous quote from Van Morrison who said, "And sometimes to move forward, you got to go back."
Yeah. Yeah, it's real.
You see a lot of guys that are getting it into their older ages, and they're starting to listen to those records that inspired them when they were kids. It's really cool.
It's so funny. The other day, I was listening to Oz Fox. He does these like live feeds on Facebook, and he was sitting outside this Cracker Barrel because he loves to go eat breakfast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, dude's like coming off of like a near-death experience, and you know, he's Striper, you know what I mean? It's like that's a big deal, you know. But like these guys are on the live, and they're like, "Hey, who are you listening to these days?" And he's like, "Oh man, you guys." He's like, you can tell he's trying to manage it. He's like, how do I say this? He's like, you know, in my age, you know, I'm not really listening to a lot of, you know, I'm listening more to like the crooners, you know, a lot of Sinatra. And he's like, things that my, you know, my parents listened to, you know, things I grew up. And he's trying to like smooth this over, you know, because I'm sure they're just like, oh, what heavy band are you so inspired by right now? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm like listening to like freaking show tunes, you know. Like,
he's not giving them the answer they want to hear. Not by a long shot. That they don't want to hear that. They want to hear who's current, who's hot.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not seeking out new bands. We're really not.
I like that it was an honest answer, though.
He just kept it real. It was so fun. It was cool to watch him like have that moment where he's like, man, I really want to have something great to say to you guys, but I know. Sorry, man. I'm like 60 years old.
Well, there's so much respect for that, though. I don't know if you guys have seen the Kids in the Hall came back last week. Okay, in Canada, they're icons, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Amazon Prime released 8 new Kids in the Hall episodes.
Yeah, I haven't watched it, but I saw that.
The greatest thing about it is they don't pretend that they're still the kids in the hall, but they have there's no pretension about, well, we're young and we're doing this again. They're
Yeah.
doing it as the white hair, and there's points when they're not quite on, but for the most part, they're back. Like it's really interesting. I just love the fact, and a lot of the sketches are about how old they are.
Yeah.
It's really funny. I just love the fact that they didn't try to go, okay, let's try to pretend we're 30 again and we're doing this sketch show. We're going to do it as is with the receding hairline and everything else. It was great. It's worth watching. If you like the original, it's worth watching.
That's funny.
Sure. But I love the idea of not caring about, again, the older I get, the less I care. I just don't care like I used to. Again, I use that lyric probably every other day where it's like, you know what? I'm not 20 anymore. And I'm glad I'm not, to be honest. I know a little bit more than I did then.
That's real.
For sure. And as you said, as you're developing your sound and your approach and everything else, you can see the journey. Just like you said, you followed the journey of Chris from trying to figure out who he was, figuring it out, and then taking it wherever else he wanted to go. That's the fun.
Yeah.
The idea of following a trail and going, okay, this artist listened to this artist. Oh, I'm going to go back and listen. I'm going to go listen back to what they listened to. That's fascinating.
I don't know if
a wealth of stuff.
I don't know if enough people do that.
That was my other question. Is you talked about like sitting down and dissecting an album and going piece by piece. Does anybody do that anymore?
You can't, man. They don't make it available.
Yeah. You don't get the liner notes.
Yeah, you don't have any of that. And like, even when you listen to a record, you're listening to it on some platform, and so there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can hold in your hand. There's nothing you can take out of a machine. There's all this algorithmic gobbledygook that makes it difficult for you to maneuver and to get back to where you were. And it really it trains you to move away from whole experience. And so
I think maybe for our generation, we can probably handle it a lot better. I can listen to a brand new record on Spotify and still get goosebumps and still get inspired because I did experience lying in bed with the headphones and just staring at the artwork, memorizing the credits, who produced it, where it was mastered. But today's generation that didn't have that experience, I think you're right. That disconnect is definitely like, they don't know what it's like to get up and flip the record over to listen to side B. Or get up and change the channel on the frickin' TV. Remember when we had to get up and actually change the station? Like the struggle was real. I miss it. I miss it sometimes. But I think because I've got that sort of in my DNA, this streaming a new album, I still will prefer listening to vinyl, but the convenience of just having it in your phone, man, it's hard to beat that, and the leveling the playing field with YouTube and the internet and Spotify. I mean, you can just go, you can get it in anybody's hands. You can write a song in your basement in Nashville, or I can do it here in Ontario and have it, and somebody in Japan could hear it in like a matter of moments. When that's really cool. On the bad side is that the playing field is level, which means we're inundated with so much material now that you just can't possibly, there's going to be a lot of crap. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's just nonsense and stuff that it's got no business being
we're in a day too where our favorite band could release a record and we might not hear about it for 3 months.
You never hear about it.
Wait a minute, Garbage did a record? Like what? Like there's no build up anymore. I guess
that's one of the parts that really hurts the most, I think, is that fact that how often, or like where are those places where there is excitement for the thing?
Yeah.
And how do you engage with it other than just putting it on while you're mowing the lawn? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that part is very, very difficult. I mean, there's some of us that might be super fans. We might, go online and pay $15-$20 for somebody to send us something,
Right.
But generally speaking, you're just kind of listening. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's and it's a very distracted world, And even just how that, I'm a Spotify guy, but like Spotify is about to run me off the way they've just jacked with their whole platform, and it's made it very difficult to like quickly get to the things. I don't even remember what I like anymore.
Right,
'Cause
right. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so congested, and yeah, it's kind of a disappointment for me. And as an artist, you're trying to figure out how do you break through all that noise,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you make yourself important to someone else, because they're dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You asked where the pockets are, because I remember I remember like weeks of conversation around three sides to every story.
Yeah.
And albums like that where you could just dissect and you weren't picking it apart to you were just picking it apart to understand it and to take it in. I have been recently, I didn't realize this till about 2 weeks ago. It's probably because I don't spend a lot of money there, but I tend to go to Third Man in Detroit, the pressing plant, Third Man Records. And I suddenly became a local patron. There was no announcement. I think I was there at Christmas time and I was talking to people there. I got designated local patron. So this happened 2 weeks ago. It's like Willy Wonka. I got the email that says, hey, you want to go to a show tomorrow night at Third Man? And if I'm not working, the answer is always going to be yes, because it's literally 15 minutes from my house. It's not far to get over the border. And you talked about the excitement. That was like, I don't even know who this band is, but you're offering me free tickets to go to a show. And that room is just such a cool room anyway, to see anybody. So I'm hoping that because I got the tickets, it was like, they lasted for like an hour or something, and then they were gone. I got the tickets, I went to the show, and I hope that registers in their system that not only did I get the tickets, but I actually used the tickets. I hope that means I can keep going to more shows. I keep getting offered more things, because it was exciting. It was like, ooh, there's a band. They were from Poland. They were amazing. But it was one of those moments where I was like, that was the first time I've been excited about like new music, since I've heard your stuff. I mean, I get excited when I hear your stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know the work that you put into it. I know, kind of the journey that both of you guys, I've known you for years, both of you. And I know the journey each of you have taken. So whenever you've got new material, I'm always looking forward to it. But other than that, it's hard to get excited about stuff because it just kind of comes and goes. Release dates come and go. Sure. But that was the moment where I was like, I think Jack White in many ways is onto something. The idea of let's make this fun again. Let's make this. They did. You've got to see this. There's a documentary called Vinyl Nation. It's all about, the fascination with vinyl right now and the resurgence and everything else. But they showed this thing where Third Man did an experiment with this, your bendable records, the ones they used to put inside magazines, where they did a balloon, send out balloons with like 5,000 copies of this new single or whatever. And then they just sent them out, and people were finding them all over the US and kind of all over Canada.
That's just awesome.
Crazy fun ideas.
Yeah.
I think that's the future. Let's make it fun. Let's make it an event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like both of you are launching projects. What can we do to make it an event? Every time there was a Soundgarden record, every time there was audio, there was an event around it, right?
Yeah.
I remember Audioslave being the first band to play at was it Letterman's stage, if I'm not mistaken? They played up on the marquee.
Yeah.
And that was their launch.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm inspired by is what can we do to, even if nobody else is doing it, how can we make what we're doing an event worthy, right?
Yeah, it's tough. You don't want it to just sort of, get released into the ether, and then
right.
You put all this work into it. Yeah, I've been listening to a guy named I don't know if you guys know who Darius Daniels is. Dr. Darius Daniels. He's a preacher out of New Jersey.
Okay.
And, he was talking a lot about how our gifts are what are given to us by God, but the skill is something that we need to work on and that we need to hone. So basically, if we do our best, you're writing the best song that you can with the gifts God gave you. You're singing the best you can. You're playing the best you can. After that, like, God's got it. Like, there's nothing I can do to make people listen to it, to make people like it.
It's out of your hands.
You just got to put it out and hope for the best, So I don't know if there's really one way to kind of, well, this should work, especially because it's a subjective medium.
Right.
Yeah. It's a tough deal. I find myself looking back at the way we used to do it, say in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And I'm just like, I kind of want to just go back to that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Just like finding, you know, getting some CDs printed, going playing some shows, you know, and just kind of creating sort of a word of mouth kind of a thing. I was out walking around on Music Row today. I was trying to go over to ASCAP, but they're shut down for the last 2 years apparently, and because they're under like New York rules in Nashville, and so like these dudes.
All
so
right.
I'm talking to the security guard. You can't even go into the building in Nashville without being double vaxxed and a mask and a test.
Yeah.
And they only have 11 administrative staff that have been there for the last 2 years. And then they had a flood 3 weeks ago in the building where the fire system went off and just destroyed the place. So yeah, so it's a hot disaster over there.
Right. Right.
But it was interesting. I was walking around and there was like paper posters, like just printed out of a copy machine or a show, just taped on poles, all at every pole in that little area. It was
How
just
cool is that?
Yeah, it was just 6 people, and they made like it was just the names of the bands just like in a wave form here and here. It was like the cheesiest like 1993 clip arty kind of a thing. And I was just like, I took a picture of it. It's like, that's the way you do it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Those are from 2004, Kenny. Come on.
I think it's funny you mentioned 1993. That was the first time I went to GMA in Nashville. That was 93 was my first year. And that was all. I have probably 3 or 4 flyers from that first year. Just like you said, because it was like that made me, and again, you had 12 different events you could go to.
Yeah.
You had to pick which one you were going to go to.
Yeah.
1993 was extremely pivotal for me, but at the same time, it excites me again. Why not do that? Why not do, if vinyl can come back, why can those approaches not do the same thing?
I think if enough, like Kenny was saying, if enough bands are out there doing it, enough sort of like, coordinated support bands doing that in an area, or plastering the hell out of cars again and putting posters up on telephone poles and just doing live gigs again. I mean, maybe there's a way that you can battle back and claw your way back. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and this is literally down the street from this place that we're playing on Friday. I was like, why is this not occur? I just assumed that we weren't allowed to do that. I thought that the cancel culture and all that stuff, had rules for everything, and I'm not allowed to put a freaking sign up about my show,
Vandalism.
What'd you say?
That's vandalism, right? Or graffiti.
Yeah, exactly. Like you hate the world. You're trying to kill killing the birds, And so
as long as there's still a Kinko's, you can still do it.
Right? I mean, shoot, I got a printer right here. It's like I print up 40 of these, man. But I was amazed because it was like I was so inspired. I took a photo and I was like, I'm gonna check out these acts.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go online and check them out. It's like now I don't have to rip the thing off. I don't even know what I don't know when the show is. I can just pull up my phone. It's on my phone now.
Yeah.
It's like if we could just encourage people to do that. Hey man, you see my poster? Just take a photo of it. Come on out. Like that's. Why not? Let's go back to that. All I need is like 100 people that really love my music.
Yep.
And then they'll tell somebody, and then I'll go find another 100 people. You just keep doing that over and over again, Yeah,
I remember the only sort of online thing that we had. So you did the poster thing, you hit the pavement, you did that, but then you had MySpace.
Yeah, MySpace was,
MySpace was the ish, man. I love that.
Way better than this crap we got going on right now.
Yeah. See, Michael, the best place that I met musicians, some of whom I worked with later, was at Kinko's in Franklin, Tennessee at 2 a.m. That place was hopping with like all these bands that all were doing showcases, were doing shows, and we all converged at, I think, the only one that was open through the night.
Yeah.
And I met more musicians in Franklin, Tennessee in the middle of the night than I remember, I can't remember who it was. Well, I ran into Brian Welch there years later doing some stuff like from Korn. Like he was just there hanging out. Like it was the place to hang out. He almost probably brought food, and I think we used to bring food and hang out there and just copy as much as we could.
Yeah.
But yeah, like why not do that? Why not pull back? Like I said, if vinyl can come back, then why can't we just do the same techniques that Soundgarden, Nirvana, all those bands did?
I suppose
back in the day.
It depends on the level of sustained damage that the last 2 years have done. How afraid people still are. And there's a lot of them out there that you see that are in their car by themselves wearing a mask that are still really sort of terrified of this. And so that it will sort of depend on, are people going to just go out and have a beer and watch a great band play again? I like to think that there's a majority of people that would do that. Maybe it's a silent majority, but
man, Michael, I apologize. You probably saw me. I just have a special joy that as a black man, I can wear a mask into a bank and nobody can say anything right now. That's still, in 10 years, I'll still be doing that.
And a hoodie.
And a hoodie. Yeah, exactly. I can go to a convenience store. Let's get going. And nobody can stop me. It's the most beautiful moment, one of the most beautiful moments of my life. Like maybe with the birth of my kids. I don't know. It's in that same.
It's definitely true power.
Yeah.
I will say though, we played an event, Sunday Night Soul in East Nashville like a month ago.
Okay.
And we had, man, I don't know, it must have been 250, 300 people in this room.
Wow.
Nice.
Freaking party.
That's awesome.
And this is a show we've been trying to get to since May of 2020. We were scheduled to play this May of 2020. And, obviously it went away. And then we did like a virtual one in that October 20.
Right.
But it was like, it was just us and the sound man and the videographer, And then we were supposed to do it again last August, and I got COVID. And then that was also the same weekend that East Nashville, all the venues just decided they were going to do a vax mandate. So you had 25 people in the room when the rest of my band went and played the show. They changed it. They didn't go as the Magi, but they went and played the show. It's 25 people in the room, one black person other than us. And it was because black folks wasn't coming out.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Nope. We'll stay home. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Not gonna make me do something I don't want to do. So that's basically what happened. And so we finally got to do it for real, a month ago. And it was everything we had dreamed. We had worked hard. We got a lot of people in there. And we put on a party, man. And it was a joy. And so we know that people will come out. It's just a matter of whether you can get the word to them, whether you could deliver something. Yeah, you got to cut through. Deliver it in a way that helps them feel like this is important to me. And I got to be there, And so I don't think that most of the means that we have now they're not set up for our success. Right. They're set up for them to make money. Yeah. And so they've jacked with all the algorithms, and they've, put us in a position where we waste a lot of time and energy for nothing, so that we will have to waste money to get the result we want. Right. And it may or may not work even still, because the algorithms are so corrupted. And so for me, I'm just at that stage where I'm like, man, let's go we'll do some of that or whatever. But I want to put my focus on things that I know that are tried and true and have worked for centuries, not centuries, but, definitely word of mouth, think about Jesus. Hey, man, go to that town and let them know what's up, Work a couple miracles, tell them I'm on my way, It's like, that's kind of what I want to do, And like you said, create a party, make it exciting, do something that allows people to know.
I'm going to miss something if I'm not there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
so
I got to tell you, like when I was before COVID, when I was traveling and speaking, I was going to schools. My business is talking to schools and kids about social media safety. I talk to parents. I talk to, I'll go speak to whoever. about how to keep your kids safe online. And my last 2 years of doing that, most of my bookings came from my fax machine. I had a fax machine when I had a landline, and I made like different flyers. I would send them out once a week. I'd probably send them to 300 schools, and I would get like 2 bookings or 3 bookings out of each time I did that. Because here's what happened. There'd be a fax machine sitting in the corner under the dust, and all of a sudden it would rattle back to life, and it would spit out something that hadn't spit out anything for like 2 or 3 years. And so people would get it and go, what's this? And like every once in a while, they would take it seriously and call me and book me. Like, because that fax machine it was still there, but nobody was using it. And I cut through the noise, cut through the emails, cut through all that stuff by sending faxes. So maybe a fax campaign
that's smart. I like that.
Future. I still got mine. You can borrow mine if you need it.
I might have to just go get one. You
can get it. You can get it at the pawn shop.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, again, it sounds, and again, sometimes I say stuff like this and it sounds like I'm 100, but if it works, it works, right? If I can cut through the noise, we talked about this with Spotify and everything else. There's so much content. What can I do to make what we're doing stand out? And whatever we can do, if it works, why stop doing it? Nobody else is doing it.
Yeah. This kind of makes me think of, I'm kind of just swinging it back to the Chris Cornell thing, but, I think about how those guys started so early, and they had to kind of break in on, weren't they Sub Pop, I think? And so like, they were slaving away, working that scene over there. I would imagine coming down to California every once in a while, but it's like, those guys had to grind that joint, basically created their own style of music. It's like, you couldn't call it hardcore, you couldn't call it metal, you couldn't call it punk rock. Totally, it was just like, it had all these things going on. And their originality, their creativity, and Chris's just like ridiculousness, just had them in the game until the whole world just converged on them. And everybody, obviously Nirvana was the top dog out of that thing, and but they were ready. They were there, and they had the level of creativity to be able to like take it to the masses. Just once they got signed to the right deal and were able to work with the right producer, and I just love specifically Chris's journey, Chris's creative journey. And how that he was not necessarily interested in you loving everything that he did, but like I talked about that interview where they're like, hey, we're just a masculine band, it's like, this is what we're into, and there was just there was a fearlessness about it, and so I always appreciate when he was willing to go to worlds unknown, to do Nothing Compares to You, and just allow his voice to tell that story. I just love that, and I didn't love everything that he did as a solo act, but I will, to the end of the road, he will always be one of the greatest vocal expressors in rock and roll history to me, just ever, just period, and he just articulated so much, created so much emotion, and spoke so many profound and obtuse ideas and lines, and I will forever be grateful. And it is grueling and sad that dude is not here to do more. So
he was so important. I know it's somebody had done when he had passed like a Kevin Bacon, like 7 degrees of separation kind of thing with him, and how important he was. He was sort of connected to everybody with the Andrew Wood thing with the Temple of the Dog.
Right.
And Temple of the Dog, the backing band was Pearl Jam. And that was the first time Eddie Vedder was ever on a record, was on Hunger Strike. And then they became like Mookie Blaylock before they became Pearl Jam. And Cornell's always like this common thread through almost every
Mhm.
story that you read about. And it's they do touch on it a little bit in the PJ20 documentary. I don't know if you guys
Mm.
saw that, the Pearl Jam documentary that they did. So they obviously interviewed Chris in that, but he was sort of like this, I don't know, elder statesman of because yeah, Nirvana were the big dogs that sort of went off to sell the most records. But like I said earlier, Soundgarden were chomping away since '84,
Yeah.
far like way before Nirvana became a thing. So yeah, I'm with you, man. It's a big hit, and 5 years later, we're still sort of feeling that devastation.
But I get the impression that 5 years later, you're still both inspired
Oh, 1,000.
by even though we wish there was more output, what he left us with is enough to dig into and
every
ponder
time
for
every time I
decades.
step up to the microphone and I start singing, I'm thinking about him
Mm.
every time, without question.
Show me the power child, man. I'm telling you, it's like I really can't articulate how important that chorus was.
Yeah.
You know, when he gets to that, because it was a different type of singing for him, you know,
Yeah.
and it was just deeply soulful, deeply groovy,
Yeah.
but deeply profound in whatever, you know, was compelling him, you know. And I heard so much stuff in that, and that was like inspiring to me at the time, you know, from just an emotional and spiritual standpoint. It was like, man, you just imagine hearing it the first time. Just it was so guttural, and it just changed how this thing happens, you know, rock and roll, how it happens, you know, honestly, because nobody was really doing that, you know, playing hard.
Yeah, especially like everybody could sort of definitely before Bad Motorfinger, he was a bit more of just like a wailer and a screamer. But definitely on that record and then Super Unknown and so on, you started to hear like licks and trills and stuff that he was doing with his voice that you didn't hear a lot of rock guys doing, which made it even more difficult to emulate him because of those little nuances in his voice, not just his like 4-octave range.
Yeah.
But,
he struggled to emulate it live, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's why the studio was so awesome.
Yeah,
because he could get it right and he could leave it in posterity, and I love that, you know, because I'm a studio guy too, man. I love the space that place gives me, you know. It's like when I was like 11, I watched this giant documentary on the Beatles, and specifically just their creative process with George Martin, and I was just mystified. I'll never hear music the same again after that, because I'd always wanted to be in the music game, and well, not always, but probably when I was like 10 or 11, I fell for the idea. But I learned so much so quickly watching those guys learn how to produce records, learn how to make records with a producer who could actually execute the crazy things they wanted to do. They left so much genius in posterity. And so I fell in love with, you know, the idea of recording and, you know, the stereo field and tape and, you know, speed. I remember being a 4th grader carrying around one of those old rectangular tape machines that my grandmother had, and, you know, the little speaker on the end, and the little thing would flip up, you put the tape in there or whatever. And
same thing.
The handle.
The
handle on the end. Yeah.
The handle.
I used to go around and record people, right? And then the batteries would start to go down. And so I would play it back and it'd be running slow. And it'd be like, I remember this one time I recorded, I was my grandma was cooking some jelly in the kitchen. I was in the back porch, and I'm like recording. I'm like, hey grandma, such and such. And I'm having this conversation with her. And she said something back to me, and I'm sitting there with my cousin, and I play it back and the batteries are going low. And it's like, hey grandma, what you doing in there? And you hear her voice in the background. I was like,
this is good.
This is Parliament Funkadelic. And so like I fell so in love with it. And then later on, I discovered what the Beatles were doing with tape. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. And then you can like do multiple tracks and, combine it together. You can do different things and speed stuff up and slow stuff. I mean, I was like so mystified by this, right? And then to watch years later, these guys go and make Bad Motorfinger, and to just be able to hear in the stereo spread and the layers between, the high frequency of the hi-hats and Terry Date's guitar, kick drum, which was very bright. And then you had the guttural nature of the bass, and the guitars were just felt even more low endy. And the way that they would, Kim would play high and then they'd go, it was like all that construct, and then Chris's voice soaring, and then all of a sudden you go down to this thing. Oh man, it's an experience, man. It's an experience. And that record took me to all those places, and I can't help but still celebrate it after all these years,
At a time when you had to be able to sing, there's no auto tuning, there's no fixing it. You actually had to have ability. Remember that? Remember those days?
Exactly.
Remember that?
Remember that? Yeah. It's like Chris Farley.
When you had to be talented.
Remember when you were the Beatles?
Awesome.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, dudes, I appreciate you discussing, and again, we talked about where those conversations, this is where those conversations are when you're picking apart, and talking about an artist and delving into the deeper levels of what was going on. But I appreciate you commemorating this day in particular, because again, 5 years later, I'm still listening. I'm still inspired. I'm still digging into the lyrics. I'm still trying to understand what was going on in a positive way, for sure. Tell me what you guys are up to. Give me an update on your individual projects.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, August 19th, the new record Subterraneans is officially being released. So I've put out 2 singles so far, and both of them sort of landed like bricks. So I'm sort of trying to think of how to not release this thing into nothingness.
Just take it to the sky. Let's get hot air balloons and helium balloons and put them out.
Try and do something that's maybe interesting other than just putting it out. But I suppose, like, I think I told you this, Ryan. I kind of got into sort of a dark place a little while ago where I was like, I don't even know if I want to put this thing out. Yep. Nobody cares. Nobody loves me. Yep. And I get into that self-deprecation sort of zone that so many of us artists do. But my daughter said something profound. My oldest daughter, she said, well, you got to put it out.
Yeah.
You gotta put it out. How's anybody gonna hear it? Like, how is God even gonna be able to bless it if you just don't put it out? So you gotta put it out. God's bigger than the music industry. He's bigger than Spotify. He's bigger than YouTube. He's bigger than all that. So. And
you notice I gave it no air when you were saying that. I just stayed silent. I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll wait till you come out of that one.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I gave it no air. I gave it no oxygen. When you were saying, oh, maybe we should, I was like, yeah, you need to put it out. We'll talk when you're.
Man. Yeah. I really needed a hug, but you didn't.
It was a tough love, baby. It's tough love. No, I know the record's coming out, so you just had to figure out that it was coming out. That's all. It's all good.
Yeah, so that's sort of the big thing, and then the podcast, we were getting ready to do the next season. I think it's the 6th season of the podcast. But like I was saying to you early before Kenny came on, I'm about halfway through writing the next record.
Yeah.
Subterraneans isn't even out yet. And it's just like, man, when the muse hits, you don't want to ignore that, because as a songwriter, you're always looking for inspiration. So when it's constantly hitting you, you gotta write, you gotta ignore that and just keep going and keep writing. So I'm recording, I'm writing. My oldest son, he's composing as well. And he's not much of a singer or lyricist, so that's where I come in. So he's making great beats, and he watched that Get Back documentary, and then watched the Rick Rubin and McCartney documentary. Did you watch that as well? Yep. So he's really inspired to just record and make beats, and I've been turning it on to like the Black Star record that Talib Kweli and Mos Def did together, which still sounds so fresh today. And then the Wu-Tang and all these stuff, just because he's really into just making beats. But playing bass himself. Like he'll come up with the bass lines himself, but he'll be making up beats. And that's just really inspiring. And I'm not used to really singing or writing lyrics on top of not a guitar or piano. So that's a really cool and fun, interesting challenge to me. And just keep pushing and keep challenging yourself. You never stop learning, right? So that's what I'm up to. Sorry for the novel.
No,
That's cool, man. And I think the thing to remember is, man, the system does not love us. So you gotta subdue that beast,
It's just fact, right? It's just accept that fact and push through.
Yeah. Because there's 7 billion people in the world. You can find you can find some folks that like your stuff. You know what I mean? It's like you just gotta go find them, and you gotta fly upstream against, what the system wants. And so it's a tough one, but ain't for the faint of heart, but we got to figure it out. So
thick skin. So the Magi are coming out with some stuff and live shows, and
we get like 9 shows coming up here in the next month. And that's kind of a big deal for us.
That is a big deal.
Are you writing?
What's that?
Are you composing? Are you writing?
I'm writing a little bit, but really what we've done most of our writing for what would be our first full length or whatever. We were talking to a couple labels, just trying to see if we get some interest out of them. Nothing's really panned out with that. So it's sort of like, all right, what's our plan? And I think that what we'll do is we'll probably release another single and then eventually work towards dropping the full length. So I've produced out probably 7 tracks, and I think we probably got 3 more that we'll need to kind of we'll need to get going in the next little bit. We've laid some basic stuff. We've done some vocals for them, but I'll finish out the rest of the production here over the summer. I would think, and then
are you guys all close to each other, or do you have to send each other stuff online?
No, we're all in the metro here in Nashville metro. I'm down in Murfreesboro, so I'm down south. DJ, our beatboxer, he's in East Nashville, and then Damien just northeast of him in Madison. So yeah, we usually meet up at DJ's spot, and we practice up there, and we come down here to my place to do the recording. So yeah, so we got that happening, and then I've got my KLT stuff. I've got like another like 5 or 6 songs that I started kind of getting caught up. I've had these tracks for decades now, but I've realized that I really want to get this next little crop out in a little EP form. I'll probably drop a bunch of singles sometime towards the end of the summer, and then drop a EP shortly thereafter, and then the Butch record that I did back in 2003. I want to actually do kind of a reimagining of some of those songs, basically, so that I can re-release them
20 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so and then I've got a whole bunch of song ideas for the second Butch album, because it's a trilogy, of course. And then I want to start working on kind of the comic book aspect of it, at least the story part, and then working towards in the next year or so, seeing if I can get somebody to draw some frames for me.
Nice.
And then there's a jam by Trump Dogs that we did back in 2015, in January of 2015. We came to Nashville, went to Lester Stell's studio, and we jammed and laid some other tracks for some other songs that I had in the can. But we have this 28-minute jam that I want to release. I don't know if I'm gonna do it on Spotify. We got a lot of scratching and samples in there and stuff, so I don't know if I want to mess with all that. But I would probably make it available on a website, and so like our own personal website, and see if we can get at least our fans and some new fans to go check it out and download it or purchase it or whatever, however I want to do. I'm not sure exactly.
Sure.
And then we have a bunch of songs in the can for Trump Dogs that I need to get finished, and so. Yeah, man, and I've got my worship project that I've been sitting on for decades too. It's called All the Commotion, and the act the act is called Above Syndicate. So it's like a funky rock project. Trump Dogs played on some of the Trump Dogs played on like 3 of the songs, and then I've used other people for it. And so I dropped a couple singles last year, but I'm gonna rework those probably, and then just keep releasing singles, and then probably drop a EP later on in the year too. So
Yeah.
Wow, it's coming. Great.
yeah, man, I've been sitting on this for a long time. It's like it's time to get to it. And,
Yeah.
I'm kind of that cat that just probably struggles to finish things. And so Butch is the last really great thing I did.
Yeah.
And so I want to get back to making great things. And that's what this year is all about. So
Yeah, I mean, KLT was Kenny's Little Trip. That was the disc you gave me when we met.
right.
It might have been cassette.
I don't know if I
Did
had
you do cassettes on that?
I think I just did discs for that.
Okay. Yeah, then it would have been the CD. And then we were playing it up here on our show in Canada. So
yeah, that's dope.
It's been a lot of years, man. It's been a lot of years.
Yeah, a lot of years, bro.
Somehow you keep getting younger. I don't know how that's working, but it's working well. So, well, again, I want to encourage you both. Keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, when I wasn't giving you air, Michael, it was because I knew that it was going to pass. When you were like, I don't think I'm going to put it. I was like, okay, I know that's going to change. So, it's and again, I'm glad your daughter talk to you about that for sure. Gave you a talking to.
I think it's because she sings on it. I think that's the real reason.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, that's
motivating, right?
That is motivating. That is absolutely motivating for sure. You could get into like a lot of like Mennonite stores that the family bands just take if you take the right picture, like the family band, you can I was up in Mennonite country in Canada like last year, and I went into a Christian bookstore. I'll end with this Christian bookstore, and there were not like 10 or 20. There were probably 500 family bands. They all looked exactly the same. You're never going to find them anywhere else but at this bookstore. It was pretty amazing. I didn't know that the industry is bigger than CCM is right now.
Right. That's crazy. That's
dope.
Dope.
If you can get a flowered print dress and a suit, you can sell your stuff in there. So I mean, hey, maybe that's how we shake it up. We get into that network.
Hey, you know what? You do what you gotta do, bro.
I'm not that
You just got to grow the beard a little bit longer. It's all good.
Okay.
It's all good.
I will do.
We're gonna shake up the entire. We're gonna get into the Watchtower, and we're gonna get into the Mennonite bookstores. We're gonna take it over. Just saying. We got to think bigger.
Hey, you know what?
Predict a bunch of shit that never comes true.
But yeah, I just want to encourage. I always want to encourage you guys. Keep doing what you're doing. Your creative output it's going to find its audience. We just got to dig deeper.
Yeah,
and connect. So
it's a grind, but we're gonna do it, man. We're gonna do it. And this year, I'm gonna try to inundate at least Nashville and make them know who I am. And so, we'll see what happens. But that's what we're here for.
Sounds like a plan.
Cheers, guys.
All right, peace, brothers. Thank you very much again. This was fun.
Right on. Yeah.